I reported my professor for harassment, and the university expelled me for damaging his reputation. Since I was little, my mom taught me that when something is wrong, you have to speak up. That staying silent means letting things continue. I never imagined that lesson would cost me so much. My name is Camila, I'm 21 years old, and until a few weeks ago, I was a second-year psychology student at a very prestigious private university in Colorado. From the moment I enrolled, I knew I wanted to specialize in child mental health. It was my calling, my passion, what kept me going through personal and financial hardships. The university was demanding, but I had always been a good student. I had an academic merit scholarship and worked part-time at a nearby cafe to cover my expenses. I gave it my all to not lose that opportunity, because I knew I didn't have a second option. Until I met Professor Nathaniel Prescott. He taught developmental psychology. He was 38, had a PhD from Spain, and a demeanor many considered friendly with students. At first, I thought he was just kind. He asked how I was feeling, offered extra books, made positive comments about my essays. But gradually, his actions became intrusive. Comments about my body, innuendos, messages outside class hours. At first, I responded politely, trying to brush him off, until I couldn't take it anymore. One night, after a tutoring session, he asked me to walk him to the parking lot because he wasn't feeling well. Naively, I went. He told me he was going through a divorce, that he felt lonely, that he admired my maturity. Then he tried to kiss me. I pulled away immediately and ran off. I didn't sleep that night. I felt fear, guilt, rage. I spent days trying to convince myself nothing had happened, that maybe I had misinterpreted everything. But the messages didn't stop. You look beautiful today. I thought about you last night. I wish I could be with you without anyone judging. I took screenshots. I recorded a couple of voice notes where his tone was clearly suggestive. I spoke with my best friend, and with a trusted professor. Both told me I couldn't let this go, that I had to report him, so I did. I went to the Title IX office. I showed them the evidence. They told me they would open an investigation, and that I had to be patient. I felt relieved. I thought I had finally done the right thing. I didn't know that was when my nightmare would begin. First came the coldness from some professors. Then the rumors. Classmates who used to greet me stopped. Comments like, "Some girls don't know how to earn grades," or "That's the girl who made up stuff about Professor Prescott." They called me in several times to expand on the information. And every time I left those offices, I felt like I was the one being questioned. "Are you sure about what you saw? Don't you think you might be exaggerating?" He says it was all consensual. A month later, I received an email. A disciplinary process had been opened against me for slander and defamation that harms institutional integrity. I read it 4 times. I couldn't believe it. I was the victim. How could the university target me? I defended myself. I showed everything again. I said it was clearly an abuse of power, that I had evidence, that I wanted justice. But the committee wasn't on my side. It was all appearances. Professor Prescott had influence. He had advised several senior staff. His image was spotless. They summoned me to a hearing. My mom came with me. Her hands were trembling. I felt like I was going to faint. I listened as a university lawyer claimed I had tried to seduce the professor, that I was using a feminist narrative to cover up unethical behavior. I cried. I couldn't help it. I felt ashamed that wasn't mine. 2 weeks later, I was expelled. The letter said, "The university has determined that the conduct of student Camila P. has severely damaged the reputation and good name of a faculty member, threatening institutional harmony." I locked myself in my room for 3 days. I couldn't go out. My mom tried to talk to me, but I couldn't even look her in the eyes. I felt like I had let her down, that everything she taught me was falling apart because of my own decisions. But on the 4th day, I got up. I checked my messages. One of my classmates, Laura, wrote to me, "I saw what they did to you. I also went through something with that professor, but I didn't have the courage to speak out." And she wasn't the only one. 3 more girls reached out. They told me similar stories. Not all of them had evidence, but their accounts mirrored mine. Something inside me ignited. If the university had silenced me, then I would have to tell my story elsewhere. I opened an anonymous account on social media. I posted part of my story, evidence, testimonies, and it exploded. Hundreds of comments, messages, women sharing similar experiences. Some from my university, others from different places. In less than 48 hours, the story went viral. Local media started contacting me. One even published a piece with changed names, but the facts were recognizable. The university responded by saying they regretted that a former student was trying to discredit the institution with unfounded accusations, and he, Professor Prescott, posted an open letter on his social media claiming he was the victim of a hate campaign by a resentful student. That was the lowest blow. Seeing him pose as a victim, receiving support from colleagues, students, parents, while I had to read comments calling me an attention seeker, a crazy girl, an emotionally unstable person. But then something happened that changed everything. One of the girls who had written to me, Olivia, told me she did have a recording, a conversation where he admitted to being involved with a student. And he said verbatim, "I know how to handle girls, none of them has ever complained. Until now." She sent it to me, and that's when I knew I couldn't stop. With that recording in hand, something inside me changed. It was no longer just my word against his. Now I had real, solid proof, in his own voice. I played that audio over and over, through tears, through trembling hands, through a mix of fury and relief I didn't know how to process. The first thing I did was contact an independent journalist who had reached out days earlier. I told her I had a recording. I asked her to guarantee my anonymity. We met at a small cafe, with my mom present. I brought the recording, the screenshots, everything. The journalist listened in silence. When I finished, she looked at me seriously and said, "This isn't just serious. This is systemic." She took charge of verifying everything, contacting other girls, building a report that didn't just focus on my case, but on how several private universities covered up similar cases. It was published a week later. The impact was immediate. The story hit national media. It trended on social networks. For the first time, I felt that the narrative wasn't controlled by them, that I had a voice, that I wasn't alone. But with that came retaliation. One day, as my mom and I were leaving the house, we saw a scratch on the front door. Liar. Someone had smashed the car window. We were nervous. For the first time, my mom asked me to drop everything, that maybe it was too dangerous. I told her it was too late to go back. Professor Prescott sued me for libel and defamation. I, who had no lawyer, no income, suddenly found myself facing a criminal lawsuit. The university remained silent, but I knew behind the scenes they still supported him. I felt like I was fighting a concrete wall with my bare hands. That's when Olivia, the owner of the recording, offered to testify. Not only that, another girl, Julia, said he had offered her a scholarship in exchange for a private dinner. Unlike me, she hadn't been afraid to record it. With those two recordings, my lawyer, a public defender who took my case when I had no one, told me we could fight back, that there was enough to open a criminal investigation against him. But we had to move quickly. We filed the complaint. The prosecutor's office accepted it. They summoned the professor to testify. His tone, once arrogant and defiant, changed. On television, he appeared more serious, more cautious. Some media outlets even began to question him. I watched all of it, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. Then a bomb dropped. An anonymous leak was sent to several news outlets with internal university emails. In one, a senior executive wrote, "This with Prescott cannot get out of control. Make them focus on the girl, make her look unstable, without evidence." It was a strategy to discredit me. And it was in writing. That changed everything. The day those internal emails came to light, my mom and I were having breakfast. I barely had an appetite, but she insisted I eat something. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. At first, I thought it was more hate, more insults, but it wasn't. They were messages of support, of shock, of outrage. One read, "This is criminal. You're not crazy, you're telling the truth." Another, "Forgive me for ever doubting you." I clicked on the link to the article. There they were, screenshots of emails sent by university administrators, talking about me as a problem, as a thorn in their side. One explicitly said, "If we don't stop her, our institutional image will collapse. Make her look emotionally unstable." Another was even crueler. "We've already kicked her out of the university. Now make sure she can't study anywhere else." I was frozen. My hands were shaking. My mom could only hug me. She said nothing. And that was worse. Because she always had words. She always had strength. But that day, her silence reflected a brutal truth. What we were up against was bigger than we thought. I wasn't just a victim. I was an obstacle to a system that protected abusers and buried the truth. The university, once my dream, was willing to destroy me to protect a powerful man. And then it got worse. My academic records were blocked. I tried to apply to another university, a public one this time, but when I attempted to submit my transcripts, a note appeared. Record of improper conduct. I called. They told me my former institution had reported serious disciplinary history. It didn't matter that it stemmed from me speaking up. They were labeling me as a defective file, a threat to be isolated. I cried that night like never before. I screamed. I broke things. I wanted to disappear. Not out of shame, but out of helplessness. Because I had done everything right. Because I spoke up. Because I defended myself. And that was what condemned me. And still, Professor Prescott kept teaching. They changed his schedule, moved him to another faculty, but he was still there. Getting paid. Writing opinion pieces. Being called an academic role model. I saw him in an interview saying, "There will always be people who want to destroy what they don't understand." And I wanted to vomit, but I didn't give up. With the support of the journalist, the lawyer, and women who joined my cause, we began gathering signatures. More than 40,000 people supported the petition for an internal and independent investigation. We got the Ministry of Education to demand formal explanations from the university, and we achieved something else. Other girls from other departments began to speak up. Testimonies of silence harassment cases, of untouchable professors, of students forced to stay quiet to avoid failing a semester. It was a pattern, one they could no longer hide. One that, if left in the dark, would keep destroying lives. But the price was high. One night, after leaving a radio interview, a man shouted at me from a car, "Lying whore, you ruined a good man." He threw something at me. It wasn't acid, thank God, but a bottle that left a bruise on my arm. My mom begged me to stop. She said, "Camila, you've paid enough. I need you alive." I promised I would be careful. But I couldn't stop. Not after everything. Days later, I received an anonymous message. A remorseful employee sent me a photo of the original disciplinary report from my case. It had been altered. The original said there wasn't enough evidence to sanction me. The final version, sent to the ministry and other universities, claimed it had been proven that I deliberately lied. They had falsified documents. I showed it to the journalist. She cross-checked it with other sources. She confirmed it. And she put together a second report. This time not about harassment but about cover-ups, manipulation, and institutional corruption. A scandal. The university could no longer stay silent. In a vague statement, they said they would launch an internal review of the disciplinary processes. But no one resigned. No one apologized. Professor Prescott took a leave of absence for mental health, and I remained without a university, without income, facing daily threats and with my mental health in pieces. But I also had something they didn't: truth, dignity, and the support of hundreds of people who chose to believe in me. One day, Olivia hugged me tightly and said, "I didn't know how brave you were until I saw you fight for all of us. I only recorded him because I was scared. You fought for justice, and we cried together. We cried for everything we had lost, for everything they had taken from us, but also for what we now knew we would never allow to happen again." I thought the leak of the internal emails would be the turning point, that justice would finally prevail, that truth had won. But no, the university issued a short statement, claiming the emails were taken out of context and possibly altered, and that they would begin an internal investigation, not into those involved in covering for the professor, but into who had leaked them. The institution didn't want truth. It wanted control. The prosecutor's office, although still investigating Professor Prescott, seemed to be moving at a painfully slow pace. Every time a hearing was postponed, I felt the momentum we had built slipping away. Public opinion is fickle, and headlines fade fast. I knew it. And so did they. When the university saw they couldn't silence me, they began to strike from another angle. Financially, we received a letter from the bank. The university had demanded the immediate return of the scholarship funds. They claimed there had been fraudulent conduct by the scholarship recipient, which invalidated any benefit received. It was absurd but legally feasible under the contract I had signed when I enrolled. I didn't have that money. It was a massive sum for my family. My mom had to close her small sewing shop because she no longer had clients. Many were wives of professors or female staff. My name was now tied to the scandal, to the problem. They called her the liar's mom. We got dirty looks at the market, even at church. It was like being exiled in our own city. I tried to find work, but references were tricky. Some jobs required academic certificates, and since I had been expelled, I couldn't access them. I offered to babysit, to clean houses, anything to help us survive. But I felt like my dignity was crumbling bit by bit. Meanwhile, Professor Prescott remained free. He was not suspended or removed from his duties. They gave him a temporary leave for health reasons. Later, we found out he was teaching online classes at a university in another city. as if nothing had happened. The most painful blow came weeks later. Olivia, the girl who had recorded the professor, called me in tears. She had received a notice from the university. They were also opening a disciplinary case against her for conspiring to defame a faculty member. The strategy now was to punish anyone who had supported me. I felt guilty. Deeply. I thought maybe I had dragged others into the abyss. That all of this was my fault. I had a panic attack. They rushed me to the ER. The diagnosis was clear: post-traumatic stress-induced collapse. In that white room, as I felt myself falling apart, I understood something. That's what they wanted. They wanted me to break. To give up. To believe it was all my fault. To think the system was too big to fight. But something inside me, broken but still alive, refused to disappear. I published a letter. This time with my full name. I showed my face. I told every detail, without omitting the pain, the anger, the loneliness. I posted it on all my social media. I sent copies to the press, to activists, to feminist organizations, to student groups, and then something unexpected happened. Support came from where I least expected it. A retired professor from the same university wrote a scathing article, saying my story was not an isolated case. That years ago she had tried to report Prescott for inappropriate behavior, but had been silenced. That she felt guilty. It went viral. A group of law students organized a protest in front of the administrative building with signs that read, "No more silence. Victims won't be silenced. Camila is not alone." And for the first time, I cried from relief. More testimonies came forward. More evidence. The case was taken up again by the district attorney's office with renewed force. Professor Prescott's lawyer resigned. Apparently, he hadn't been informed of all the evidence. Or perhaps he simply didn't want to keep defending someone so indefensible. And yet, the university remained in its bubble of impunity. We filed a civil lawsuit. My lawyer found a clause that allowed us to sue for moral and economic damages. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. While that process moved forward, we obtained a court order forcing the university to release my academic records. It was a small victory, and with that I applied to another university, not as prestigious, but socially driven. During the admissions interview, I told them everything that had happened. I thought they would reject me, but the dean said, "We don't reward silence here. Welcome, Camila." I went back to school. With fear. With scars. But I went back. There's still no final sentence against the professor. The university has yet to apologize, but I no longer feel alone. I'm not the same girl who trembled in a courtroom. Now I am a woman who raised her voice and refused to be destroyed. And if all of this helps even one more girl speak out, then all the pain will have been worth it.